Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be colouring the skin, or watercolouring the skin, that's what I'm better at saying. I'm going to be putting colour to the skin with watercolour paint. And the watercolour paints that I'm using just for the skin are these Nectar watercolours. Now I did purchase these off Etsy and I will leave the links down below. Some of them have cracked quite a bit. I don't know whether that's to do with the formula or what. I'm not a watercolour paint professional, so I don't know the reason why that they've cracked. Maybe it is because they're just dry, but nonetheless they are really good paints. So before I do that, I should have got everything ready. I'm going to just spritz the paints to just get them activated while we sort the tape out. Now I do try, if it's in a colouring book then there's not really much I can do. But I've just scanned my Jasmine Beckett Griffith, I think this is from the Mermaids colouring book, and I've just printed it out onto watercolour paper. Now I've printed this out ages ago, my old printer. My new printer doesn't support thicker paper, so I couldn't tell you which printer would fit the paper. It was an older printer that I had, and luckily I was into watercolour back then. So I've got a couple of pages like this actually. So the masking tape that I use is the Unibond, again off Amazon. And I'm just taping. I'm not too worried about the hair at the moment because I'm just concentrating on the skin with this one. I'll just tape it all the way around. If I was using the tape to create a white border, I'd be a bit more careful where I was placing it. But considering we're just doing the skin today, I think that should be okay. Just make sure it just stops the paper from, I don't know the technical word for it, buckling. I think that's the right word. Right, so I've just got my little palette here with previous colours that I've kept in there because I will use them. And what brush shall we use? I've got a few different ones. I've got a Billy Shorewell one that I really like actually. A Daily Rowner one, which is the round 6. That I've had this for the longest time and it's held up really well, so I'll keep them two to one side. I do have a few of the Caran d'Ache aqua pens that I might use, and for a finer detail again I'll use the Billy Shorewell, and that's a size 2 and the other one was a size 6. So to mix my colours I'm going to use this one. Just wet my brush. Now I'm going to create my skin colour palette before even touching the page, so I'm using the colour Golden, just a little bit here to add a little bit more water. Now I like doing it in layers skin, and I've only done this twice, so this is my third time attempting to do skin with watercolour, and I've not done it on camera yet. So I'm going into the colour Sand, which is the one that's quite cracked actually, and mix that in. And I want a little bit of the Porcelain, which is this shade. Add a little bit more water, clean the brush off, and a little bit of the Porcelain. And I just want this colour, this very first colour, as a wash, just a very thin wash. A little bit more of that Porcelain. Just like that, so I'm quite happy with that colour, so I'll move that to one side. And all fingers and thumbs. Move the paint to one side, and let's bring you in ever so slightly. And I want to do the wet on wet technique for this one, I think. Now this brush is a quill brush size 6, so it is quite large. I'm just going to wet the brush with this. I'm just going to double check on the bottom of the paper. Yeah, that's okay. That I didn't have any paint residue left in the brush. and I'm going to do a light wash of this all over. I'm not going to worry too much about the eyebrows or even the eyes at this point, because I will go over with either paint or coloured pencil. And this isn't a fancy, I can see that the ink is running a little bit, that's from the printer. This isn't a fancy watercolour paper. This was, I believe, the company's called Moz Art off Amazon. And like I said, I did purchase this a while ago. But I will try and leave all the links in the description. You can see there's a bit of a blue tinge to that now. Some of the ink is running a little bit. So we're just going to do the face, concentrate on that. Because if I pre-wet both the face and the body, areas might dry a little bit too quick. So to get the base layer down, I'm using the Billy Showell brush in the size 6. I've just dampened that off. And I'm just wiping it on an old tea towel, old cloth, and popping some of the paint on. Now before I start, I just want to double check in the sunlight that I've not missed any areas where I want the water to be, and it looks good to me. You can see where some of that ink has run though. So I'm just going to place this all over as my initial base layer. And the way that I created this skin last time, it was just layers and layers of the paint. I would make sure as well that you mix enough paint to cover the whole area that you're wanting to, because you wouldn't want to get halfway through and run out of the colour. So let's spread that down. I'm going to go over the lips as well, just to give them a base colour too. And I think I'll get away with popping the next layer on before this completely dries. Just make sure that is even. I'm going to clean my brush off, wipe it on the tea towel, and just move that colour around a little. Any extra colour that you don't want, just make sure you dry your brush, and then the brush will just pick up the extra paint that you don't want there. So basically from that colour I'm going to just add a darker shade just to start the shading process. So let's add a slightly darker shade to this colour that we've mixed. So if I just move this over so you can see what I'm doing. And be careful because the page is still wet. So let's just add a little bit of the chestnut, just a little bit. Just like this. I'm going to add a little bit more water as well, and that should be okay. So clean that brush off and then move over to the other brush. Right, so I'm just going to do a little test area just to double check that that area is still wet. Have I got too much paint on there? That was a good job I checked. So it's not much darker, just a tiny bit. We're just placing it where we want our shadows. So normally it would be where the hairline is, underneath the eyes, the side of the jaw, underneath the nose and underneath the lip. Let's sweep that colour down. And then the same thing with the other side. bring it under the eyebrow. I'm not too worried at the moment with these lines because I'm going to go back in and fix them just so they're not as harsh. On the top of the nose. Now this is where I really struggle, whether it's with paint or whether it's with coloured pencil. So I'm going to try my best to taper in a nose just a little bit. Link it up to the eyebrow, that might be a bit easier. Same thing. Now it's just matching these up. That looks good to me. Let's make that a little bit more circular and connect up here. Just like that. Now with a clean brush, so I'm just rinsing it in the water, tap off the excess on your old cloth, and I'm just going to go over the edges and ever so slightly blend them out. Just like that. I'd wipe off your brush as well every now and again because you will get the excess paint still on there. So just over the edges to wipe off and blend. Same with this side. Underneath the lip. And then the nose area. And then just wipe off again. Just mess around with it until you're happy. Now I am going to let that completely dry before I add the darker shade because I don't know if the paper is going to be wet enough. So I will be right back once it's dry. So that is more or less dried now. If I just lift the paper up, you can see how much it's flowing. She looks kind of 3D. But once this is completely dry, that will just go flat again. Or even if it doesn't, you can just iron it over the top. But 9 times out of 10, it flattens by itself. So I've got the colour that I've just used last, still in here. And just the same process really. But I'm not going to wet the paper. So it is dry, so I'm not going to wet it. So I'm just going to add a little bit more of this chestnut, just to make it a little bit darker. I'm going to move the colour over here actually, just to save some of that lighter pigment, just in case I need it later. So that should be enough. They are really creamy and smooth, these, when they go down. So I'm just taking the excess off of the brush. And we'll start on this area. I believe this is where we started in the beginning. And the lines will be a lot more harsh because it is on dry paper. So I'm going to do working areas on this side, etc, etc, and not do the whole face like I did with the wet on wet. And then clean my brush off, rinse off the excess water, and then blend those edges. And that's basically what I do for skin. We might go ahead and add another layer, or we could add a little bit of pink to the cheeks maybe. I haven't got a pink in this palette, so I will have to switch up my paints. So dipping back into the paint, making sure I'm getting all the excess off. I find it really relaxing doing painting. The only thing that takes longer than colouring with colour pencil, I'd say, is the drying time. Just waiting for things to dry. That's where you have to be a little bit patient. You could use a hairdryer or a heat gun if you've got one, but sometimes I find that it makes the paper go a little bit weird, so I'm choosing not to use that today. I'll just let it dry naturally. It's quite a warm day today, so it shouldn't take too long anyway. So clean off the brush and blend your edges. Just like this. And for the nose, same thing. Just be super careful where I'm adding this. Like I said before, the nose isn't my favourite to do. I have to be honest. Underneath the nose and underneath the lip. And I'm going to add a little bit underneath the eyes as well. It's a little bit more shadow underneath there. Clean off the brush. And blend those edges out. Have to be careful on the inside here. But while we wait for that to dry, I'll do the exact same thing on the body. Just before I completely leave that, I just want to fix that line. I don't want it so harsh. Just like that. So we'll go in with that original colour. Luckily I did keep a little bit. And do the base layer. I might even do the shells as well with watercolour. That might look nice. So where I've got these excess little puddles of paint, I will pick them up in a second, just to make sure this is as even as I can get it. So clean my brush off, more or less dry it off on the towel, and then pick up that extra colour that's puddling up, and then wipe it off onto your towel again. Just like that. So we're going to have to let all of that dry again. Well, I might be able to do this little bit actually. When I know I'm going to have to leave something to dry, I do like working in certain areas. Like if I was doing this shell, I just do one layer and then one layer and then one layer, let it all dry together. That's how I typically like to do it anyway. But let's add a little bit of darker shading while it's still wet. A little bit down here as well. The paper is still wet, so it should blend out easily. A little bit more colour. Down the shoulder again. Now let's clean that brush off and fix these lines. completely clean the brush off, sweep over the whole area. I'm just not happy with this little spot here. Just work on that a little bit more. Right, so I'm going to let that completely dry. I don't think she's looking too bad. Now that that is completely dry, yep, it's been drying for about 25 minutes, give or take. I'm going to do another layer just on the border, I think. I might add a tiny bit to the face actually. We'll see. We'll see. I'll pre-wet this just in case I need that chestnut colour again. But I need to sort the edges out on these as well. I'm not too impressed with these. So to do that, just a clean brush. I'm just going to leave that there for a second. Noses are my worst nightmare to colour and paint. My arch enemies. So I'll add a little bit more pigment and try and blend that out a little bit better. So I've just wet it just to do the wet on wet again. And blend those edges out. Just like that. Let's move that up a bit. Just pick that paint up, and I can see I've got a bit of a harsh line there as well. So I'll blend that out a little bit better. And let's work on the body here. It's still looking, excuse me, it's still looking a little bit patchy there. And I don't know if this side is as dark as this side. So let me just add a little bit more. It is all trial and error. This is just how I'm doing it, and I'm definitely still learning. To make these areas a little bit darker. And just blend that edge out. Right, so for the border, so I've not added any more chestnut to this just yet. I'm just going in with the colour that we previously used. Just to darken it up, just a tad. So, what do we think? I'm still not happy with the nose. Really not happy with that. So, I'm going to leave that for now and see if I can think of a way of fixing that. I just don't like these lines. I'm thinking if I go in with a darker shade, I'm just going to have to do it. I'm just going to have to do it. So I'll go in with a slightly darker shade. Make sure the end of the brush is pointer, and it is. And what about if I darken the edge but pull it forward? Darken the edge and pull it forward. Clean off the brush. Blend that edge out. And let's try and blend this a little bit better this time. And then just clean water to bring this up to try and get rid of that line that's just there. Does that look better or worse? I'm not sure. Right. Just to be cautious, I'm going to leave that for now. But can you see that very initial, let me just wipe that off, line that I did? I think I did that too dark. See there? I think I did that too dark, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to fix that from there. Just see if I can cover it up a little bit. Pick up that paint and wipe off. Need a little bit more water on the brush. It's still there ever so slightly. I don't know if I'm going to be able to fix that. You see this here? So let's just add a little bit more. I'm quite happy with this side. Let's wipe off again. Pull that colour down. I think that is the best I'm going to get it. She's not very symmetrical. Wipe off the brush again. Right, I think if I keep fiddling with it, I'm going to make it worse and worse. I'll try a different brush. Try this thinner brush. I'm not adding any paint. I'm just making sure that the brush is wet. Actually, I do want a little bit more. Just there, underneath the nose, underneath the lip. And let's go in with a bit more of the chestnut. Let's just do it. I did a little bit too much to the palette though then. Let's give her some more shading under the eyes. And put some makeup on. I will blend this out, so don't worry, I'm not going to leave it like this. And a bit of eyeshadow up the top. Clean off the brush. And blend those edges. I think I could fiddle with that all day, and the paper in the middle is bowing ever so slightly. If I just turn it, you can see just at the nose because of how much water I've actually applied. So I think I'm going to do, I don't want to do all the shells because some of the shells are covered up with the tape. I could move that tape over ever so slightly, which, shall I do that? If I can pick the tape up, which I can't from that side. Here we go. So if I just move that over ever so slightly and just pop it here. And I'm going to go with the same sort of tones for the shells. So I've got this chestnut colour here. I'll base all of them in that colour, I quite like that. And then probably the espresso as well, which is this one and this one for the shells. So I'm not pre-wetting the paper, I just want to get a base colour down to add a little bit more water. Just like that, and the big one just down here. I think I might end up making this page quite neutral by the looks of it. Maybe a pop of colour here or there. And I'll pick up that extra bit of paint when I've used this that's on the brush. So I'll wipe off the brush now and pick up that excess paint that was just puddling. And then we've got just one here. I think I'll do these shells a slightly different colour. So while I'm finishing this off, I'm just going to wet the espresso colour. Clean off the brush and pick that little bit of paint up. Right, so for the espresso, I'm going to put it in a little tiny, one of the tinier holes just here. I don't want much of that pigment. So just like that. And then start on the edges, pull the colour in. So wipe off the brush, clean water, same again, just to blend out them very edges. With any sort of supply, you just got to practice. If you want to learn how to do something a certain way, you have to do it numerous times. And a little bit more on the top one as well, and then we'll blend these out. So wipe off the brush. And I will leave this to completely dry and come back so you can see the final result before I end the video. I don't know if I'll do the rest on camera or not. I need to think about the colours that I want to use. I'm going to add a little bit more and darken this bottom one up actually. So I'd say I'm probably going to leave it for at least half an hour to completely dry this before I come back and show you the end result. So I'll see you in a little bit. So there she is, completely dry. The paper has flattened out ever so slightly. It will get better the longer I leave it. I am going to finish this off in my own time, add more details to the shells and just take my time and enjoy this page, because I've not got many pictures like this printed out on watercolour paper, so I sort of treasure all of these that I've cut and I want to take my time and enjoy it. But please do leave me a like and subscribe if you're new, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.